Socialism in Europe, and the Russian Revolution. In this topic, we are going to learn about the February Revolution in Petrograd. The February Revolution in Petrograd. In winter of 1917, conditions in the capital, Petrograd, were grim. The layout of the city seemed to emphasize the divisions among its people. The workers' quarters and factories were located on the right bank of the river Neva. Fashionable areas, the Winter Palace, and official buildings, including the palace where the Duma met, were on the left bank. On 22nd February, a lockout took place at a factory on the right bank. The next day, workers in 50 factories called a strike in sympathy. In many factories, women led the way to strikes. This came to be called the International Women's Day. On Sunday, 25th February, the government suspended the Duma. Politicians spoke out against the measure. Demonstrators returned in force to the streets of the left bank on the 26th. On the 27th, the police headquarters were ransacked. The streets thronged with people raising slogans about bread, wages, better hours, and democracy. The government tried to control the situation and called out the cavalry once again. By that evening, soldiers and striking workers had gathered to form a Soviet or council in the same building as the Duma met. This was the Petrograd Soviet. After February, army officials, landowners, and industrialists were influential in the provisional government, but the liberals as well as socialists among them worked towards an elected government. Restrictions on public meeting and associations were removed. Soviets like the Petrograd Soviet were set up everywhere, though no common system of election was followed. In April 1917, the Bolshevik leader Vladimir Lenin returned to Russia from his exile. He and the Bolsheviks had opposed the war since 1914. Now he felt it was time for Soviets to take over power. He declared that the war be brought to a close, land be transferred to the peasants, and banks be nationalized. These three demands were Lenin's April thesis. He also argued that the Bolshevik Party rename itself the Communist Party to indicate its new radical aims. Soldiers' committees were formed in the army. In June, about 500 Soviets sent representatives to an all-Russian Congress of Soviets. Meanwhile, in the countryside, peasants and their socialist revolutionary leaders pressed for a redistribution of land. Land committees were formed to handle this. Encouraged by the socialist revolutionaries, peasants seized land between July and September 1917. The Revolution of October 1917. As the conflict between the provisional government and the Bolsheviks grew, Lenin feared the provisional government would set up a dictatorship. Bolshevik supporters in the army, Soviets, and factories were brought together. On 16 October 1917, Lenin persuaded the Petrograd Soviet and the Bolshevik Party to agree to a socialist seizure of power. A military revolutionary committee was appointed by the Soviet under Leon Trotsky to organize the seizure. The date of the event was kept a secret. The uprising began on 24th October. Sensing trouble, Prime Minister Kerensky had left the city to summon troops. Pro-government troops then to take over telephone and telegraph offices and protect the Winter Palace. In response, the Military Revolutionary Committee ordered its supporters to seize government offices and arrest ministers. At a meeting of All Russian Congress of Soviets in Petrograd, the majority approved the Bolshevik action. Uprising took place in other cities. There was heavy fighting, especially in Moscow, but by December, the Bolsheviks controlled the Moscow-Petrograd area. Some important dates: 1850s to 1880s. Debates over socialism in Russia. 1898. Formation of the Russian Social Democratic Workers' Party. 1905. The Bloody Sunday and the Revolution of 1905. 1917. 2nd March, abdication of the Tsar. 24th October, Bolshevik uprising in Petrograd. 1918 to 1920, the Civil War. 1919, formation of Comintern. 1929, beginning of collectivization. In the next topic, we will learn about socialism in Europe and the Russian Revolution. That's all in this topic. Keep learning.